If everybody could welcome Alex, that would be great. Alex, thank you. Great.
Great. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk today. So I'm going to actually start with a poll. So I don't know if we can get up the poll question. So I'm going to be talking for the next half hour. And I've got a question for you that you can answer during my presentation. There's a list of 10 companies up here, and the average age of these 10 companies is 8 years. They've only been around for a little bit, but just imagine that you had €1,000 per company, so 10,000 euros, there's 10 companies, and you would have invested it 10 years ago when these companies were just starting on their journey. Some of them still weren't even alive at that point. They were just about to come. My question to you is, how much is that, would that investment be worth today? So we're going to come back to this question. I'm not going to answer it now. There's obviously a lot of people with one answer. Let's see what you think by the time I finish this presentation. So let's maybe we'll get up the presentation and we'll come back to this one. So I'm going to be talking about customers, I'm going to be talking about consumers, I'm going to be talking about the importance of the consumer and the supply chain, and how supply chains increasingly are becoming personalized. They're becoming personalized towards the consumer's needs, and that means quite a large change for a lot of businesses, particularly traditional manufacturing businesses, particularly for traditional businesses, full stop. There needs to be some, and there will be some radical changes coming up. I'm going to be talking about 6 pillars in particular. Some of these themes you've heard earlier. You're going to be hearing them for sure a bit later as well. So the first one is something called the synchronization of flows. Businesses in the past have been set up in silos. They've had inbound teams, they've had manufacturing divisions, they've had outbound supply chain, they've had sales divisions. With the power of the internet, with data, and the data flows that are now being gathered by businesses, we believe firmly that synchronization, the inbound and outbound flows, is becoming much more synchronized, which means businesses are becoming much more agile in responding to consumers' needs and customer demands. In addition to that, logistics and demands are becoming much faster. There are demands for next day delivery, next hour delivery. Somebody's going to invent the next 30-minute delivery soon. But we'll also talk about, is that correct? Can you make money from next hour deliveries? Is it possible financially to be doing that? And what is the real benefit for the consumer? We'll talk about hyper-personalization, the fact that supply chains are becoming extremely personalized towards consumer needs going forward, and what that means backstage for a lot of our businesses. Also want to pick up on the point about big data eating strategy for breakfast. You've heard of the famous quote about strategy for breakfast. Big data is transforming businesses, and this is becoming the enabler and the transformer for a lot of large organizations going forward. And we're reacting to that as a group of businesses, both at a global level or at a regional level. The future logistics has to be green. Consumers are demanding it now. Businesses are adapting. Deliveries are becoming greener, but we still have far too much plastic waste. We have far too many trucks and aeroplanes flying through the sky, and they're not flying in the most economic way. So we need to turn everything into a carbon neutral solution where possible. And my final point on this little journey will be about humans. And though we've seen some great pictures of robots, even dancing robots, fundamental will be humans are more critical than ever going forward, particularly for supply chains. As we saw from earlier, one of the major themes of today is to talk about Industry 4.0 or Supply Chain 4.0 in this graphic. We've had the 3 different phases. We're now at the point of today, we're entering into the fourth generation of industry change, which is much more around customization, personalization, digitalization, which requires new skills and new skills within the supply chain. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and I'm not just going to be talking about robots, I'm going to be talking about humans and what it means for humans and the new skills for workforces. Increasingly, the businesses are going to be talking just around consumer centricity. The supply chains will be built around consumers. You'll be able to get data, information gathered about the consumer buying behavior, right down to the supply chain information that's also going to that consumer. Whether it's the order, where is that order in the supply chain? Has it been picked yet? Has it been shipped? Consumers will be able to get that information going forward in the future. They can't get it today. It tends to be a little bit isolated or a little bit segmented. But in the future, customers will really be demanding to know where is their product, when will it be delivered, and if they're not happy with it, then they'll return it. And all of that will need to be managed through a very synchronized flow of supply chain information. Oh, sorry. Technology will enable that, but technology will be will be driving down the costs of these deliveries as well. So there'll be a smarter use of data. There'll be a more efficient way of setting up a business to deal with those goods to be delivered to consumers. And then also the return flows also being managed in a much more synchronized and efficient way. The sustainability will be taken for granted, we believe. So zero emissions will be the norm. Carbon neutrality will be the norm. We're still a long way away from that, but there are significant changes happening in the marketplace today. And then finally, the people. Maybe I should have started with the people, but yes, we will be working with robots, cobots, I'll make a reference to. Yes, there will be some roles maybe replaced by robots or autonomous driving vehicles, but there's also extreme developments around co-working alongside robots and what that means, and we call them cobots. As DHL, every 3 years, we do something called a supply chain trend radar. We look out into the future. We look out 20, 30 years. We look out 5 years. We look out even 2 years. And we identify what we believe are the larger trends and changes happening in our industry. As you can see here, there are a lot of them within the inner circle, this area here. This is everything within 5 years. Outside of that, within 10 years. Quite a lot of changes. And I'm going to make a reference to some of these. This is done by DHL. It's also done with a number of consulting companies as well. I'm going to be talking about the importance of omni-channel, so multiple channels to service a customer demand, plus the personalization of the supply chain behind that. We're going to be talking a little bit about augmented reality and how that will, and is defining how products are devised at a personalized level. We're going to be talking about moving product fast, so the fast logistics with a little video on tube logistics, so Hyperloop logistics, and some of the other developments where product is just moving at extremely fast speeds and will be moving at extremely fast speeds in the future. We saw a little bit about 3D printing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, about the trends now to near-shoring, production facilities now starting to appear, popping up closer to home in the local or the regional locations, and producing and mass producing some of those products for consumers. And then supergrid logistics, the big companies getting bigger. The list of 10 companies I talked about there, their wealth is disproportionate. As we saw earlier from Simon, some of that wealth proportional growth is just continuing in a direction that is not sustainable for the mass population, the 6 to 8 billion people who will be on our planet in the coming years, and we need to do something about that. And then there's this trend on the personalization. So when I talked about consumers, we talk about the personalization of what they're ordering. And increasingly, unlike in the past where there was mass production of a single product and produced several thousands or tens of thousands or millions of times, we're now heading into a world where customers really can personalize what they're ordering, right down to the level that the stock information can be recorded, can be tracked, and then delivered to the consumer exactly what they wanted, in the sense of a pair of shoes with their actual name on, designed for your child or your relative or your parent. The level of personalization is gathering pace very quickly. One example, you've seen, you would have heard about the Adidas personalizing some of the products. It could be made within a number of weeks, and that's all made locally from scratch, right through to production, and then through to delivery to the customer shortly after that. And then all of this is gathering data, lots of data, and we need, in the future, the businesses to be able to manage with that data, analyze it, and learn from it, so that actually this will drive is a better forecasting, a better demand planning. We're seeing the merging of the supply and the demand coming to a stage where we haven't seen in the past in large organizations and large supply chain organizations particularly, but data is now coming in at such a level that as long as the data is correct, then you can really analyze it, you can really look into the future, you can forecast it arguably better using data and algorithms than was possible in the past. So I talk about synchronization of flows. One of the key enablers to synchronization of flows is visibility. It's control towers, either AI generated or more traditional generated, because there are some on the market already today. So control towers that are managing where is the stock, how that stock's being moved around across the supply chain, but now moving around the supply chain in a more efficient way, even managing through to returns. So in the traditional past, when you ordered a product, it came in the post, it had a returns label on maybe, and if it's in the fashion industry, for example, 30% of products on average get returned. Well, now even the returns label is using smart technology to analyze where's the most likely place for this product to resell at, which isn't necessarily, it's not the DC, the warehouse that it came from, it's not necessarily the shop it was first bought at. The most likely place that it will resell at is now the name of the returns label that product goes back to. And that's using data algorithms to really work out on the basis of probability and the actual dimensions of the SKU, where is it going to be selling next. We're seeing more make to order. So we're seeing technology driving box technology, for example. So a number of businesses that are investing in box technology to reduce the amount of waste that a box is, the amount of air that's shipped around, for example. So really customized box making. And now we're starting to get into the point where companies are really wanting to invest in that, not just for the environmental angle to reduce the amount of waste, but also in the sense of it makes most sense, and it means that you're carrying less inventory. You're not sitting on a warehouse that's half full of packaging. You're sitting on a warehouse that's sitting on an inventory that's needed for the next few months or weeks with the right packaging made to order. And so the flow of goods coming through your warehouse is then a far more efficient use of storage space and inventory costs. And then enabled also by technology, blockchain. As Simon said, there's been a lot of discussion around blockchain. Now it's being applied. Now it's actually, you can see blockchain technology embedded in some leading edge brands. So for example, counterfeiting of expensive handbags. We're now seeing blockchain and little tags being embedded into those at production in China or wherever they might be produced, and then flowed all the way through the supply chain through to the point of sale. And if there is an issue or a question from the consumer, they hold up their phone, they get the QR barcode reading, and you can tell it's actually an authentic product. It's gone through the whole blockchain process, and there's authenticated data and documentation about that. That's quite a revolution. It started, as I said, mainly at the high end of goods. We're seeing the cost of this technology now starting to lower down. It'll be coming into some of the mass products at some point soon. When it comes to fast logistics, you know already about next day, next hour deliveries. It seems to be like a journey that the consumers are going through. But some of the journey is being created by the companies producing or selling, such as the Amazons of the world. They're creating this 2-hour delivery. Our question is, can you make money from that? Is it economically viable to have a business that is delivering within 1 to 2 hours? Is it really what the consumer needs? Or is it something that's being encouraged and it's driving an industrial change, putting more vans on the roads, more people on the roads to then deliver those, more trucks on the roads? We saw last year in the European market, in 1 or 2 of the very large markets, the system's starting to creak a little bit. We have road infrastructure. We don't have more roads. We're not allowed to build many more roads. But we also have to watch how we synchronize the flows across our transport network. And if we're asking for very short deliveries at very speedy times, we also need to be aware of the consequences of the amount of traffic that needs to put on the roads. And is it sustainable? Is it the right thing to be doing? And as long as businesses are, being successful, their share prices are going up. They often have, maybe a logistics arm, but they also might have a data arm, which is selling consumer data or whatever and making huge margins. We also see that actually the costs are going up at a disproportionately high level, higher than actually they're able to cover them. Now, is this the way that we want to be going in the future? Or should we be doing something about it? Should we be trying to actually make sure that the consumers get what they want, but they're paying for what they're asking for, and they're paying the right level? So we have a lot of discussions as DHL with some regional global companies around what is the right cost point for these different types of services. Should we be encouraging the 1 hour, the 2 hour, the next day deliveries? Yes, we should, but what is the price that should be paid for that? And is the consumer willing to pay it so that the consumer doesn't just become used to it being a free delivery with that actual customer that they've bought the product through? Quite fundamental sustainability questions that are asked, but also most importantly, economic questions about the future. When I talk about fast logistics, we have talked about some trucks, we've talked about some vans, we've talked maybe some bikes that the postmen are cycling on today. Over the next few years, we're going to see that transform as to how products are moved around, not just the global flows. We have the North-West Passage up in the far north that's now being opened up to some trading in the future. If climate change continues at the rate it is in the north, then we might see that as a permanent trading route. But there's some other technologies that are being developed, and one of them being Hyperloop. And I've got a short video I'm going to show in a minute on the Hyperloop. But before that, I'm going to talk about example of fast logistics in a major conurbation. So here's an example of a company, successful company, launching a targeted product at its consumers. This is the top end of its consumers, looking at a very nice pair of running shoes. It targets 0.01% of its consumers, sends them an email or a text. It says, we think you'll love this trainer for either yourself directly or your partner. We'll deliver within 2 hours if you confirm now that you'd like it. So imagine being a consumer getting that information. What does that mean from a supply chain point of view? It means that we have helped and worked with a company to ensure that there's forward stocking locations in these major conurbations. This is launched in 3 major US cities at once as a trial. It means that the stock is there. It means that the orders get picked. It's app enabled. So the consumer who's had the message come through on their telephone sees where the product is. It sees that it's sitting on a shelf in a warehouse or in a forward stocking location. It sees that it's getting picked. They know who's picking it. It's actually got a name of the person picking. They know it's then gone into a truck or a van, and then they know it's going to be delivered. And then what happens is, in terms of extreme personalization, here we had some runners, people running to deliver this product, all within 2 hours. Very small returns rate. Most people were quite wowed by the service. This is partly testing a new concept for our customer here, very successfully. And we believe this type of activity, when it comes to fast logistics, the ability to launch a product quickly, it might be a campaign, it might just be to a very limited number of consumers, but the most loyal consumers for that business will become more prevalent, and from a supply chain point of view, it means that we need an infrastructure after that can deal with how do we deliver, where is the stock, give the visibility to the consumer, right to the point where it's delivered. They sign the delivery note on the computer screen, and back it goes, or they might return it. And we're shrinking down the lead time. This is no longer something that happens, yes, I'll run a campaign, I'll pick it, but you won't get it for another 2 weeks because it's actually sitting on the other side of the US in another DC. No, we're bringing the stock much closer to the consumers and where they are. Now I'm about to show this video, so I think we can go straight into it to talk about one example of Hyperloop, fast logistics. Logistics is getting faster. Imagine you can move product from one city to another city, between continents, or actually between countries at 1,200 kilometers an hour. You might well have heard about this. So there we see, that was actually a video from European markets. So there's between France and Spain, there's a targeted Hyperloop discussion going on. We know there's some others around the world as well. But these are pods that are being developed that will be moving product at extremely high speeds. And then they won't just be moving product, they'll maybe start with product, then they'll be starting to move consumers or customers who'll be wanting to move from one city to another. And then the end, you know, there's the future then is endless as to what you can move at these type of speeds. Of course, it requires high infrastructure, but of course, at the same time, it challenges industries like logistics industries, transport industries, about how to react to this, or to be part of it and actually be building these Hyperloop solutions for consumers. Because at the end of the day, there's massive benefits, both economically and for global trade. So just going back to the hyper-personalization point I wanted to make around consumer centricity, putting customers or consumers at the center of everything that happens in businesses. Very much also the approach of logistics companies working with some global regional customers of theirs. But with the data now becoming much more visible, so it's either becoming more visible through control towers or through different teams working together where people are now starting to really analyze data using algorithms. There's new insights coming out of that data which didn't exist before. These weren't typically skills that were being used or tapped into. Data was, yes, being gathered by both the manufacturing companies and logistics companies, but really it wasn't being analyzed in the level of data and the level of detail which is now possible. So what we found is it's offering new insights. It means that now logistics companies are also understanding the consumers on the other side of the retail that we're maybe delivering through to a Walmart or a Tesco's. But some data is now starting to come back out about the consumer behavior. And we're trying to adapt our supply chains to enable a much more agile, much more flexible service going forward. Because if we're not more flexible, if we're not more agile in our way to respond to consumer demand, then there'll be others that will take that market. And we're seeing disruptors coming into the market, or new businesses coming into the market, disrupting the traditional and some of those traditionals. But this we see as an opportunity for to innovate, to get closer with customers, and also to invest in some of this technology ourselves. And consumers obviously are wanting the product anywhere, anytime, any place, moving around. We're finding that they're ordering on the internet. They might say, yes, I'll be at home at 6 o'clock. You deliver at 6 o'clock and you find they're not there. They've gone to the gym. They're not back for another hour. Now, with technology and data and tracking and tracing and the synchronization of the flows, your ability to react to that becomes much greater. Your ability to react and ensure that the product's in the right place at the right time becomes greater as the interaction with the consumer becomes a much tighter information flow. So we think the world's moving away from what's called mass customization towards individualization and therefore personalization of the supply chains. And our businesses need to get ready for this or invest now to ensure that we're ahead of the curve in the future. Regionalization being the point about production coming closer to home. You no longer have to wait for a factory in China to produce a car part. These parts can be and will be produced much closer to home, and therefore the lead time will go from, instead of say 6 weeks, down to 4 or 5 days production through to delivery. That will be possible. And then on another model which is around pay as you use. So the ownership of goods, which we've always taken for granted. We go to a shop and we buy something, we take home, we own that thing. It could be a car, it could be a household appliance. There's new models on the market now where actually the ownership is more like a leasing ownership. And we believe that in the future, people won't necessarily own many of the goods you own today. Your house, it might be leased, your car might be leased. These won't necessarily be products that you need to own, because part of the leasing agreement is the preventative maintenance. These car parts will get replaced when they need to be, because the technology embedded in those parts, whether it's a household appliance or an actual car, will be telling the organization you're leasing through, whether it's the car manufacturer or another business, that some of those parts need replacing. A light bulb's gone, or one of the power units is showing signs of early wear and tear. So preventative maintenance, let's go and change it now. And so you'll be getting this proactive information, or even a service where somebody will come along and say, I want to replace that part because we believe it could go wrong within the next few weeks or months. So the Internet of Things connecting lots of appliances around the house is enabling a great streamlining of information, and we believe also more enhanced services for consumers, and then also within some of the products that are being produced, smart clothing, or it could be RFID tags placed into trainers, or any type of clothing, for example. You really get all of the customer information, not just the blockchain information on is it authentic, has it been made according to all the right standards, but also, it's the product quality of that product. Has it had the right temperature through its life cycle? Has it gone out of temperature? Has it been shaken around? Could the product be damaged in any sense? And technology is helping us with all of that, and there are lots of trials with whether it's retail companies or it might be pharmaceutical companies around product integrity. I'm going to be talking in a little bit about Vision 2050. So we're trying to show some examples here of the day-to-day uses of some of this technology. We have a vision suite. We look out into Vision 2050 at some of the disrupting technologies. One of them we believe is virtual reality, augmented reality, these headsets that we saw the child wearing earlier on, but also a great way to reduce returns. So if any of you work in the fashion industry and the amount of returns you have to deal with, say 30, 35%, well, imagine if actually you could use augmented reality with a consumer so that they didn't need to order 5 or 6 different pairs of shoes to try them on, or 5 or 6 different shirts just in case the size is wrong or the cut's wrong. If they use the augmented reality already with their body, and their height and their size, they could actually customize that far more targeted, and therefore the need for them to order 5 or 6 pairs and have them delivered for free would then reduce. You'd be able to deliver exactly what they wanted, what would fit them, because the augmented reality would tell you that that's almost certainly what will fit their size and the size of feet or size of body. And so augmented reality opens up a lot of opportunities from a logistics point of view, also about becoming more efficient. So we get the right product in the right place, or we deliver to the consumer the right product that they have first time, they wear first time, without needing to replace it or without needing to return 4 out of 5 deliveries that they have been sent. So talking of 2050, I'm now going to show 4 or 5 short videos. They blend in one to another, kind of. We've cut them. They blend in. If you just take a few minutes to think about the main changes they're talking about, whether it's personalization of the shopping experience, whether it's about dematerialization of goods or 3D, and I'll refer back to those afterwards.
How does transport look in the year 2050? The global movement of goods is dematerialized. Our modern world is characterized by the transport of material products, particular types of commodities individually packaged. We send everything everywhere, around the clock. But what if goods no longer had to be physically moved? If they could be converted into weightless data streams that could be beamed to any location? That would be the future of digital transport in 2050. Dematerialization is the term for this modern process. Every product becomes a code, so it can race at the speed of light over the earth on data highways, free from congestion or delay. In this process, every coded product would have an exact destination and reach it safely. There, local materializing centers would take over, converting the data back into products. All the necessary information is transferred as data packages to a 3D printer. This then simply prints out the desired object, from gym shoes to home furnishing. How does transport look in the year 2050? Global goes local. A worldwide chain of supply with a few central production sites from which millions of people everywhere receive identical goods. That's the reality nowadays. But in 2050, those times are long gone. Instead, globalization has triggered a counter-trend, regionalization. This is due not least to rapid acceleration in product life cycles. Merchandisers sometimes release new product lines and collections on the market as often as every 2 weeks. At the same time, more and more consumers act as prosumers and design their goods themselves. In local microfactories, user-generated design becomes the established production principle. Decentralization and regionalization are also key concepts in the differentiation of delivery channels to provide an increasingly dense logistical supply chain. There's a tailor-made transport service for every need. What can the materials of the future do? Intelligent materials from a 3D printer. It used to be that behind every product there was a specific manufacturing technique. There were an infinite number of tools and machines for an infinite number of products and materials. In 2050, it's different. There's a new 3D printing process that can simply print a huge variety of products. That means industrial 3D printers are like mini factories. With them, anything that's been designed on a computer can be produced. Only as many resources are used as are actually necessary. And 3D printers make it possible to manufacture innovative materials with astonishing abilities. The 3D printed fabrics in a jacket can react to changes in weather and temperature. How does shopping look in the future? The virtualization of shopping. By visiting internet shops, we can already, today, examine products from all sides at the click of a mouse and put our choice in the shopping cart at the end. But in 2050, online shopping means much more. In the future, ubiquitous digital services give us virtual access to a huge variety of products. It is, in keeping with the concept of customized lifestyle, completely individually tailored to the user and can be experienced with all of our senses. This opens up a digital space in which products can be tested the same way they can be in a shop. In this way, people can experience their material properties, providing a variety of sensations. For example, the texture of a fine wood compared to that of a delicate fabric. Even the dimensions of scent and flavor are virtually reproduced.
So as you can see from many of the themes around dematerialization, personalization of the shopping experience, even though the videos that go behind this were created only 2 years ago, some of what they're saying is, I think, very true. And you can see in 2050, yes, maybe 3D printing at a mass scale will just be part of the norm. But in one or two of the other technologies, it's not going to be 2050. It's going to be happening before that, and we already see the trends going forward that way. And a lot of that is enabled by by big data and the way that companies are using big data and creating almost these data ecosystems where information is pulled in, whether it's supply or demand, that algorithms and artificial intelligence is being used to such an extent now that we're creating forecasting tools which are more efficient than the traditional methods which have been with people looking at historical data. These machines are able to feed in the latest weather patterns and establish, well, when it last rained for a long period in July in Prague, the effect on the sales of that particular product was the following. And then you can try and run a correlation. Well, is that likely to happen this or next year if it's going to rain at the same period? These machines are able to react in such a fast speed to this other information that's all fed into the forecasting tools that it means the actual flow of supply to demand starts to become a lot more merged. We'll get inventory levels be able to be brought down by anywhere between 10 and 20%, depending. But these are real effects of improved information that's coming into the logistics and supply chain flows. Inventory coming down, service levels being able to improve, and certainly not have any negative effect on the way that consumers are getting their product through. Robotic process automation is an interesting one. I recently was in Turkey and I saw an order that was placed by a customer, ordered through one of the large marketplaces. An order that typically takes a person 4.5 minutes to process. They have to open multiple sites, the website, the customer's ERP system, the logistics company's systems, as well as the transport. 4.5 minutes to actually transfer that product from an order through to the next phase of it. Through robotic process automation, the same test, 25 seconds. So a dramatic change in the way and the processing speed, because these computers are able to operate in all at the same time, concurrent processes, and even be able to flick between tabs instead of flicking manually between tabs. They can do it automatically through their programming. But with that comes a fear, not just a personal fear, but I think a general fear that these hub economies, these huge data companies that are being created that we're seeing so successfully on the stock markets or coming to the stock markets like Uber and co, we make a reference to supergrid logistics. So this is the ability of these companies to gather data, enhance businesses, disrupt industries, and use that data to almost like exponentially improve the business and the consumer experience. And the value of these companies is also heading exponentially upwards. And the big are just getting bigger. These, the Tencents, the Alibabas, the Amazons of the world, these companies are getting significantly bigger. And partly, or mainly, because of their use of data, the way that they're setting up these data organizations with Google, setting up Alphabet, Ant financing, part of the Alibaba group. Businesses that have been created almost from scratch, which are hugely profitable. They're running margins of well in excess of 60 or 70%, and able to funnel or fund other consumer interactions that maybe have smaller margins in them, all enabled by big data. So the question is, what are our businesses doing to ensure that our staff are able to tap into that our leadership teams are able to tap into these trends and transform our businesses? Because many of us working for companies that have been around for more than 8 years, in some cases maybe 80 years, and maybe even longer than that. We need to transform, and in that sense, we need to help our staff and upskill our staff in skills which are going to be relevant for the future, that enable us to compete with some of these other companies that are moving at a hyper speed. When it comes to green logistics, I think the main point we'd want to focus on is around zero emissions and carbon neutrality. I do believe firmly this will become a norm for shipments. Even children, I've got a 5-year-old, their expectation of how we get a package delivered to us is that it isn't lots of boxes and there's lots of empty space. They don't want that. They just want the product. They're quite happy to send it back and recycle it. This is a different mindset that's coming through, and we need to react. We need to change our supply chains to meet that. And I know we are. We've got companies that are very forward-thinking, like IKEA, Dyson. James Dyson announced to his entire business globally that he wants secondary packaging removed from his business completely in all parts of the world by 2020. Not 2030 or 2040, 2020. And it needs that kind of vision, and it needs that determination to really make those changes. And the propensity of the circular economy is only going to get larger. It's going to become more of an important logistics issue about recycling waste that's produced, and what are we doing about it? So what we're seeing a company like a logistics company produces huge amounts of waste, or uses lots of plastic, shall we say, in its processes. But there are new technologies that are accelerating about how can we take, for example, what we call secondary shrink wrapping out of the supply chain. What do we need to do? There's some technologies that are just starting. Yeah, that are being used, they're being tested. Great. But how do we eliminate it? Can we eliminate it? Yes, we can. We have to. It needs that creativity. It needs that innovation from all parties to enable that to happen. So green, we can deliver product faster. We can be very hyper-personalized and have personalized supply chains. But we need to make sure we're doing it for the environment in the right way. And then finally, I want to talk about people and the importance of people. We can get scared by seeing all these pictures of these robots jumping up and down, and some of them looking like rather military, shall I say. No, we believe that we need robots. We believe that we work with robots in the right processes. We also believe that our staff are extremely important to us, and that will always be the case, or at least certainly into the next millennial. The type of skills that we're identifying as we're needing now to start training our staff in, typical things like problem-solving skills, creative thinking skills, empathy. These are important skills in people that will be needed more and more as we're moving through change, large transformational change in our industries, whichever wave we're going through. If it's into the sixth wave, we're going to need to be a more empathetic leadership force, and it's important in our recruitment that we're finding those skills. I think also exploring. The ability to explore and innovate and test things and not be scared. And I like the analogy of the I versus the T-shaped organizational structure. We're going to need to be encouraging our staff to make more change and do it faster. So we believe the future skills are what we need to start recruiting right now. So in all recruitments, we're making sure we're looking at these skills to ensure that we have the right people to deal with the future trends in logistics. And of course, we've got lots of challenges. We've got challenges about drivers. So it's one thing seeing pictures of automotive self-driving trucks hitting the ground. There's also an extreme challenge about getting drivers into the roads. They're generally people who are 50 and headed towards retirement. There's not many young people who are wanting to drive a truck. And of course, when they see driverless trucks, why would they want to go into that industry necessarily? However, apprenticeships are extremely important, an extremely important way of getting people in, because we're still going to need vans to deliver. We're going to still need bicycles to deliver to consumers, or even people to walk the streets through some sort of crowdsourcing delivery mechanism to consumers. And of course, we've got the older generation. So it might be in the future that people work fewer hours, but work for longer over a period. I think the reference earlier to about taxis and robots is an extremely valid and extremely important one. When are we going to start to tax these robots? Why should a robot not pay a tax? They should be. We pay income tax on people who stand there and work. Why shouldn't we be paying similar or higher taxes for robots that are doing a similar job? And there's lots of technologies that are being developed. In our business, in logistics, all of these technologies need people. These technologies are not replacing people, they're enhanced by people. Some of the skills of the people, yes, need to improve. A bit more engineering skill, a bit more data analysis, for sure. But these are technologies that work with people and not against them in logistics. So then just to wrap up, the 6 pillars, I've talked through all of those. And I hope it's given an idea of the type of future we see for supply chains. The personalization is extremely important, and it's a trend that's becoming increasingly prevalent in our business. But it's enabled by these 6 different pillars, and 6 pillars where, with all customers, we're trying to make these trials or these innovations more real and part of the normal way of working when it comes to collaboration between supply chains and manufacturers or the consumer-facing retailers. So just to wrap up then, of course, going back a number of years where we had the TVs, that's now being replaced by iPads, virtual reality headsets, or whatever it may be. The really important thing is we're talking cultures. We're talking about people, we're talking about company cultures. So with all of this talk around the future and AI and what computer processing will do to our business, it's also important that we see as leaders our culture. What are we doing with our cultures and how are we enhancing our cultures to deal with that future? And the culture of a business will become, in many would argue, an even more important attribute than it is seen today. The culture of the company will keep people in that business for many years. It's all about making sure you're giving people for a long-term sustainable job and some growth opportunities in their development process. So there's certainly not a robot in sight there, but I'd just like to wrap up and just say thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Alex. Super. Lots and lots of detail in there, and I'm really glad that we've then taken that into the customer, picking up what that means and some of the trends. We'll go now. In fact, let's have a look at the slide and see whether or not who was correct. I'd like to say I went to 120.
I think 72% of people were correct. So well done. Yeah, 72%. So actually, if you took 10,000 euros 10 years ago and invested in those 10 companies, you would have made, if you were to sell today, 180,000. The point being, what other opportunities to invest are there out there at the moment? There aren't that many where you can turn 10 into 180. There are a few for sure. The second point being, what are these companies doing to redistribute wealth? These companies are all getting very rich. I mean, and the owners are getting even more richer, and they're all deciding to fly to the moon. The Bezoses, the Musks, the Bransons of the world, they're all trying to put little ships on the road. Well, that's great if they all, escape and go and live on the moon. Wonderful. But we're talking about people. We're talking about organizations and billions of people on the planet. What are these guys doing, these companies doing to redistribute that wealth? We need to have an answer to that quite soon, I believe.
And that's interesting. I think also the point you made about sustainability. We've been doing a lot of things focused on investment and development with the events that we do at Property EU. And sustainability, let's say, immediately after the financial crisis, went very, very low down in terms of people's views on it. And increasingly over the last 2 years, that's come up much higher in the discussions we're having, including things like livability, wellness, brand, how people want to be engaged in the building as well as in the brand that they're working for. So it's very interesting, especially coming from you, because you're working with a lot of these brands that everybody knows and uses. Let's move to the slide to some of the questions. Let's pick these up. Tom, okay, thank you, Tom, for this. Is individualization and localized, robotized 3D manufacturing, and that's not so easy to say, manufacturing the end of mass production in China for the rest of the world? How will that affect logistics in Europe?
Nice question.
Quite complicated, quite
yes,
a big topic.
I don't think it's the end for China, for sure. No, China's rebuilding itself, as we talked about. It's got its 40 or 50-year plan. It's got a leader who's going to stay there for them. So China will be extremely important for global trade, for sure. But maybe the focus areas of some of that trade will change. And I believe that for Europe, there might be some new opportunities, whereas a lot of in the last 10 years, 15 years, production that got pushed out to China or got pushed out to some other countries, I think we'll start to see some of that come back, whether it's 3D printing manufacturing units, which can be 100,000 square meters of opportunity for real estate execs, or it might be but it will come closer to home. Whether it will come into Germany or Czech Republic, it's difficult to argue that, but I think labor law will be extremely important. How flexible is the labor law in that country or that region, continent in the EU's case, that will attract that business? Because if not, it will go to maybe North Africa, or it will go to the Middle East instead. I think it's a great opportunity to start preparing now for these type of manufacturing units closer to home. They might be not doing 100% of the manufacturing either, but they'll be doing the customized, the stuff that needs to get to consumers within 48 hours or 72.
We've got 3 specific DHL ones, one of which has just disappeared. Oh no, it's still there. DHL's role will be going into digital transport and 3D printing in the future. What does the H stand in DHL? You can do both the D, the H, and the L, should you wish. And also, we've got types of warehouses, but also things like automated driving, those kinds of things. What do you see as the timelines for some of these? So try and pick those up if you can.
So the first one, DHL's role going to be in the digital transport and 3D printing future. It's going to be a fundamental part of what we do. We will not be moving. We're investing in it now. So digital transportation is something we've already ordered a load of these autonomous trucks from Tesla. We ordered them a year ago. We're now very interested in these Volvo ones that came out last week. This is technology that we need, and we need it because our customers need it as well. So our customers are wanting more environmentally friendly deliveries, or they might be wanting cost savings down their supply chain. We need some of this technology to help us with that. 3D printing is already there. I mean, we're using it with car manufacturers. We're doing some of the printing. It might be even some 3D printing for some parts of medical devices as well. So it's coming, it's there. It's just going to get bigger and bigger, we believe.
Okay, good. And what if people won't need any products being distributed? You pointed out there that there may well be printing in your own home, potentially 3D printing. Yeah. What does that mean? I mean, how can you know what the society will need in 2050? I'm assuming this is a guess.
Yes.
and anybody can come back in 2050 and check. But just, where have you got these views from, I suppose, that picks up?
I mean, you can buy 3D printers at home. So there's some things you can print already today. I mean, the units cost a lot of money, but the price is exponentially going down. That's the important thing. So soon you'll have, we believe, home 3D printing units, or it might be a regional, it might be in the local area. You go to your corner store that you can print some certain parts of products. They'll get digitally, the IP and the digital messaging will get sent to that, and then it will produce this thing either in plastic or food or whatever product is that you've ordered. What is the
just to pick up Philip's point there as well, does that mean there will be less things need to be distributed in general if people are printing them at their own home?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, there should be, yes. There might be less traffic on the road, which is a good thing, because it's better for the environment. We believe there'll be more smaller parcels being shipped around as data gets more integrated between the demand and the supply, that you'll be able to move stock around more efficiently. So instead of mass producing loads of stuff and then selling half of it and having half sitting in a warehouse for a year or whatever until you get rid of it, we think actually no, there'll be more customized orders going through, more shipments, but there'll be a lot less waste, a lot less redundant stock sitting around in a supply chain.
Okay, good. And when will the majority of DHL vehicles be self-driving, do you think? Thank you, Honza, for that.
That's a nice question. I think it very much depends on the cities and the country. So a lot of focus on mega cities. So these large conurbations like Jakarta, they've got real problems. We're more likely to be doing self-driving trucks in those countries than others. That said, in Germany, for example, as you'd expect with an environmentally friendly policy and government policy, we already produce electric scooters or vehicles out of biodegradable products. And and we're replacing the entire fleet. So the entire fleet of diesel vans or old petrol vans are being replaced now by an entire fleet of electric vehicles. And our competitors are doing similar things. So it's an industry that is transforming and having to transform to be more sustainable in the future.
Okay, good. Kind of 2.5 minutes left of the Q&A. Let's try and deal with these as quickly as we can. I like the fact that to avoid fake news, we've got the real Andy Stacey. I like that. What type of warehouses should P3 build for DHL going forward? Is that going to change what you need?
I think so. I had an interesting discussion last night with one of your colleague from about interior design in warehouses. So P3 building these wonderful warehouses. There is an argument that says, a lot of these warehouses are near shopping centres or in really strategic logistical points. There is an argument that said they can be transformed into shopping experiences. People might go to a city, but actually if the location is located to other retail parks, for example, you could turn a warehouse into a shopping experience, and a nice forum where digitally they can order pretty much anything, and in the warehouse behind it, they can get that product delivered to them within minutes, technically, or if it's not in the warehouse and it can't get within an hour, then it gets delivered to their home as they get home. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for warehouses to make themselves a little bit more funky.
Okay, good. Belt and Road as realistic alternative to ocean freight?
Yes.
Yes, good, or like short answers.
Yes,
that's good.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we'll have time for isn't the term prescriptive analysis an oxymoron, but if you can do it in 10 seconds, you can.
No, but can I answer the question about where the H comes from in DHL?
You can, yes.
No, so DHL, created by 3 people. H stands for Hill. It was one of the 3 people. The whole idea was they based in San Francisco. Product going to Hawaii took days, because in the old days there was old aeroplanes. So what they did is the boats would take days. They just developed the customs clearance documentation, put it on a plane, so by the time the ship arrived in Hawaii from San Francisco or wherever, the paper was already there. They could clear it through, so the product got to consumers quicker. That was the idea behind the company.
Okay, good. And quickly, I think there was an interesting question there, which was about what's going to be the impact on cities, sustainability. When there was another one which was about when are you actually going to get the Tesla lorries, and if you're talking about changes, like Andy mentioned there, to the types of warehouses, if it's smaller, more 3D printing, what does that mean in terms of cities?
Okay, well, I think when will we get an electric truck? A little bit depends on Mr. Musk and how he gets on in the next few months. We might be that we get one quicker from Volvo. We will see, but it'll come quickly. I mean, they're due in a few months' time. What was your next question on these stocking locations? Well, I think you might find warehouses being broken down into being mini production sites. So, the 3D printing needs to go somewhere. There's loads of regulation, obviously, in Europe. You can't just set up a factory, but could you transform warehouses into semi-production sites? I believe you can, and I believe there's a great opportunity for companies like logistics companies and real estate companies to do something in that field. And it can be multi-type of production. You can be making shoes, you can be making suits, you can be making car parts. It doesn't necessarily matter as long as your building's big enough and the walls can be ideally moved around a bit, or at least segmented.
That's great. We're out of time. I think what we'll try and do is the questions that we haven't been able to answer, we'll get Alex to answer them remotely. So we'll be able to find a way of doing that. But great presentation, really interesting. Good to pick up on this point about brands. We're going to come in a second to Christophe Reveron, who's Director and Chief of Staff for the Merck Group. But in the meantime, if you could join me in thanking Alex, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alex.